Walmart just made a very shocking announcement that floored their workers as new hires will get paid less than what they would have been paid just a few months ago. The reason for their pay cuts? Better staffing.
The biggest private employer in the country has cut wages for some new entry-level workers.
Now, experts say this is the latest sign U.S. employers are seeking to reduce labor costs as the market cools. Walmart changed its wage structure for hourly workers in July. Before that, new employees, including personal shoppers and stockers, had been making about $1 an hour more than new cashiers and other entry-level workers. Now they are making the same starting wages of $14 per hour.
Now you might be asking, how is this going to improve staffing, right? Well, the reason is kind of like this. The change in pay means that more workers are within the same level, right? And that means that somebody that's working the register can also work with the food, or someone who's involved with stocking can also move to another part of the store without impacting their pay. In short, more work for everybody while Walmart makes a killing with their profits. How's that sound to you? Do you think that's fair for us? Now, the problem is somebody's got to go fetch those jobs because we're entering the season where Walmart needs more workers, and some workers are not going to mind a pay cut before they even step foot in the store. But imagine having to wear multiple hats in one company. Isn't that insane? But I guess it's all part of the plan since Walmart stock went up by 1% after this announcement. And we're not done with Walmart, all right? They're doing everything in their power to try and cut back on cost and drive most of it toward profits, as this also happened quite recently.
Walmart is asking some of its 16,000 pharmacists to take pay cuts by reducing their hours as the retail giant looks for ways to reduce costs. The move, which Reuters has learned exclusively, highlights new pressures at Walmart pharmacies. Starting last spring, store directors began asking pharmacists, particularly those in higher wage brackets, to voluntarily reduce their base salary hours, according to a source. Store managers were also asked to start hiring pharmacists at lower base salaries. Walmart confirmed to Reuters that it was reducing the amount of hours it was offering some pharmacists, citing a drop-off in demand for drugs during the summer months and requests from pharmacists for a better work-life balance.
You know what gives you an insane amount of work-life balance? Losing your job. That sounded way better in my head, but yes, you and I are well aware that layoffs have taken over our country and no company is safe from these cuts. Now, before we get to this next part, make sure to drop a like and subscribe to the channel because y'all know I deliver the updates that matter to us all. Appreciate you guys for the support. So yeah, layoffs. Goldman Sachs, one of the largest investment banks in the world, just announced that they're getting rid of laggard employees. What does that mean, right? Well, they're the workers that are lagging behind. They're not leaders or anything of that sort. Managers within the company have already listed out about 440 employees in investment banking, trading, asset and wealth management, and operations that are going to be directly affected by these cuts. So here's my question though, and feel free to answer me on this one if you like. Do you guys feel that workplace politics didn't play into any of the decisions on these cuts? I mean, it's not impossible that some people may have favorites, you know, or maybe they have very least favorites, if you know what I mean. But I guess it's kind of normal to see such a big company deciding on cutting dead weight if they feel as though they're not contributing enough to their profits. I already have the headline if they do decide to cut even more people. So y'all ready for this? Goldman Sachs employees. Okay, I know it was corny, but it kind of fit the idea, right? And since we're already talking about banks, let's talk about a small one called Republic First. Not First Republic, all right? Republic First. Y'all have no idea how hard it is to search for this small bank because the bigger one that just failed keeps coming up first. So this smaller bank, a Philadelphia lender with around $6 billion in assets, well, they're in trouble right now. The only thing that's keeping them afloat is the faith of their depositors, as the end of June showed that their deposits were only down 10% compared to 2022. Now, the problem is investors are taking their money elsewhere, and who can blame them? Interest rates are higher at other banks, or depends on what bank you're banking at. But they also have huge paper losses that they don't have to report to anyone. I mean, it doesn't even show up on their own balance sheets. But the moment somebody checks, then, well, that's when you have a huge problem. You see, they have money in the bank that's uninsured. How much? Let's talk about it in percentages. Now I'm gonna give you guys a chance to guess, all right? You guys got the number in your head? Great. 60%. 60% of their deposits are not insured with the FDIC. How crazy is that? Now, sure, this isn't the biggest of banks. I mean, it's estimated to be only about 0.2% the size of JP Morgan. So it's like a speck to them, but still, you know, if they went under today, just how much of those depositors lose. And of course, I don't want them to close. Nobody wants that for any business, but the risk remains the same, you know? Now, this reminds me of this report from the FDIC where they say that they could have done more for First Republic Bank, the big one now, all right? They said that they should have been more aggressive with policing the bank's risk management, although they also said that the bank run that happened may have made it much harder to keep the bank afloat. Now, let me ask you guys, if you thought that your bank was about to go under, would you want to take your money out or would you leave your money in there? I mean, I think like any logical person would think of moving their money to another bank or maybe even invested in something that's going to make them money, you know? Although the FDIC does have an ace up its sleeve, and it seems as if they've actually learned their lesson with their recent bank collapses that we saw this year, although it might not work as well for smaller banks.
Regulators unveiling a new set of bank rules last week that would require lenders with at least $100 billion in assets to issue enough long-term debt to absorb losses in case of a potential seizure. The proposal from the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, or FDIC, is designed to prevent the systemic worries that roiled the U.S. banking system earlier this year when several mid-sized lenders like Silicon Valley Bank and Signature Bank collapsed. Our next guest says the regulatory overhaul for large and mid-sized banks could lead to stronger pressure for those banks to merge in the coming years, leaving smaller banks arguably less stable. Joining us now, John Heltman, Washington Bureau Chief for American Banker. And John, as you write, this could create sort of a two-tiered system. I mean, I guess you could say we already sort of have one, but this would make it even more acute. Walk us through how that would happen.
Thank you, Julie. So this is a little bit of a thought exercise, right? So we have the rules that were sort of proposed last week from the FDIC, the Fed, the SEC. We also last month had capital rules that were proposed by the same regulators that would effectively raise capital, especially for the largest banks. And there's still more to come. There's a Community Reinvestment Act overhaul that will probably end up costing more money for banks. The CFPB has been working on rules on late fees, thus restricting late fee income, and on data collection and some other things. And in addition to all this, we're in a landscape where interest rates are making kind of interest rate margins tighter, loan demand is lower, and because loan demand is lower and there are all these underwater assets or underwater treasuries that led to the demise of Silicon Valley Bank and others earlier this year, it's just making things a little tighter for banks in a general way. And the banks that are best situated to weather that tightness are larger banks, right? And by expanding these rules to include a broader swath of banks, it's going to apply that same kind of economic pressure to a bigger group of banks in the kind of mid-size to large, range. And that pressure will lead many of those banks to say, well, we'd probably be better off if we had a bigger base from which to draw, thus increasing the pressure to merge.
What are your thoughts on this, guys? While we have to admit that we still have to have some money in the bank, changes within the banking landscape will surely change the minds of a lot of people. But hey, at the end of the day, the decision lies with you. Now, before I go, I just want to thank y'all for spending time with me today. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for dropping a like for the video, and I'm gonna see you guys on the next one.